Have you ever witnessed a scene so unfair that your heart aches and you even need to take a deep breath before continuing to watch? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover might surprise you a lot. Imagine a respected university, crowded hallways, anxious students, and an air of expectation. Everyone is waiting for the arrival of an extremely famous guest, a billionaire known as much for his fortune as for his arrogance. He arrives surrounded by flashes, security, guards and demands, as if he were entering a palace and not an academic environment. From his first step, he speaks loudly, gestures even louder, and treats everyone around him as if they were invisible, or worse, inferior. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever met someone who believes that money buys respect? Well, that's exactly the atmosphere that fills the campus that day. The students watch the scene with a mixture of fascination and discomfort. After all, it's not every day that a billionaire sets foot there, but it's also not common to see someone act with such arrogance. He demands ice water, exclusive space, absolute silence, as if he were above any rule of the institution. And, as he walks through the corridors, the social humiliation begins to take shape. On the other side, almost unnoticed by the crowd, is a black woman of simple appearance. She organizes some papers, adjusts chairs, checks details of the auditorium as if caring for something with affection and responsibility. But for him, for that man who believes the world revolves around him, she is nothing more than a subordinate employee, someone he imagines has her place. He approaches without asking permission, casts a disdainful glance, and utters comments that cut through the air like razors. The kind of phrase that not only hurts, but also reveals a lot about the person who utters them. In front of the students, he states that people like her should stay away from important decisions, reinforcing his prejudice masked as superiority. The silence that settles is heavy, uncomfortable, and it is in this silence that the revolt of those who witness the scene and the indignation of those who are watching now are born. It is here that you realize that this story is not just about humiliation. It is about the clash between arrogance and dignity, about how poetic justice sometimes waits for the right moment to act. The woman, however, doesn't react as he expects. She doesn't lower her head, doesn't change her tone of voice, doesn't respond aggressively. There's something in her gaze, firm, serene, confident, that leaves even the viewer puzzled. You know that feeling when someone knows something that nobody else in the room knows. What you're about to discover makes everything even more interesting, because while he continues to parade his arrogance through the college hallways, completely blinded by his own ego, there's a powerful truth hidden right before him. And it's this truth that transforms this story into something so remarkable. And while the students exchange uncomfortable glances, wondering how far this will go, he continues to demonstrate his distorted view of power and superiority, a power built not on wisdom or respect, but on money and appearance. What he doesn't realize, and perhaps you aren't expecting it either, is that this woman he humiliates is not just an employee. She's not there by chance. There's something about her that simply doesn't fit the inferior role he's trying to reduce her to, and it is precisely here, at this exact point, that the story begins to change, in a way he could never have predicted. And perhaps it's precisely this feeling that something doesn't fit that begins to awaken a certain unease in you, because, while the billionaire continues to proclaim his superiority, convinced that he knows every inch of that environment and every person who works there, the truth approaches silently, firmly, almost like an answer from destiny itself. And before the story moves on to the revelation that will turn everything upside down, let me ask you something. What have you felt so far? Does this situation remind you of something you've seen or even experienced? If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what touched you the most. Because stories like this only gain strength when we share our own experiences and reflections. And that's not all. When you comment, when you like this video, and when you decide to subscribe to the channel, you're not just pressing buttons. You're saying you want to continue being part of this conversation, this community that believes poetic justice exists and that stories of transformation deserve to be told. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. It's thanks to you that these messages reach further, inspire, comfort, and provoke real changes in the way each person sees the world. So, if what you've felt so far has touched you in any way, leave a like, subscribe, and participate in the comments. This strengthens not only the channel, but this entire chain of people who are seeking stories that move and make them think. And while you reflect on all this, the billionaire continues walking with an air of superiority through the college hallways, completely oblivious to the impact of his own words. He doesn't even imagine that, just a few steps away, life is about to teach him a lesson so profound that no investment or wealth could buy it. And it is at this moment, in this dense atmosphere of expectation, that something begins to change almost imperceptibly, but which will soon, very soon, transform the entire story. The woman's silence wasn't merely an absence of words. It was a silence that carried weight, depth, presence. While the billionaire continued to display his arrogance, spreading comments that carried not only prejudice, but also an almost childlike certainty that no one would ever confront him, she remained there, motionless and at the same time inexplicably powerful. There was no abrupt gesture, no look of revolt, no outward sign that this was affecting her internally, but there was something in the way she held the papers, how she breathed deeply, how she kept her spine straight, something that seemed to say she wasn't being diminished, but observing. And that look that didn't attack, didn't question, and didn't ask for understanding, had a silent impact capable of dismantling even the most self-assured person. It was curious to note how the students around seemed to feel the same thing. Some looked away, others held their breath, as if they perceived, even without understanding why, that there was a force there that didn't match the image the billionaire was trying to project. It was as if everyone knew they were witnessing an unjust situation, but at the same time watching the behind the scenes of something bigger, a hidden truth, about to be revealed. One of those rare moments when life seems to prepare a silent twist, anticipating a change in the mentality of the observer and perhaps even in the journey of those participating in the scene. She didn't retaliate, didn't rush to leave, didn't show offense at the harsh and misguided words. She simply breathed, slowly raised her face, and looked at him as one who sees beyond the surface. That kind of look that doesn't confront, but questions, doesn't challenge, but exposes, doesn't humiliate, but reveals the other's pettiness without a single word being necessary. And it was in that instant, an instant so brief that many may not have even noticed, that something changed in the atmosphere of the hallway. The billionaire, so accustomed to being the central figure everywhere, hesitated. It was only a second, but enough for his expression to contract, almost imperceptibly, in an involuntary reflex, before a presence he didn't expect. That look wasn't one of anger. It was one of awareness, a look of someone who understands the depth of the decisions they make in life, who knows the impact of their own silence and understands that certain answers don't need to be given immediately, because they are given at the right time, in the right place, and with the exact force to transform everything around them. And the more he spoke, trying to reaffirm his superiority, the more evident it became that she didn't fit the role he was trying to impose on her. There was a serenity there that didn't suit someone subjugated, a posture that completely contrasted with his assumptions. The impression was that she was simply waiting, as if she knew something greater, something he didn't yet have any idea about. The students felt this contrast almost instinctively. You know when you watch a scene and feel that there are layers behind what's happening, as if the narrative is about to turn, and you're already emotionally prepared. for the impact. That was it. The injustice was clear, blatant, but behind it was an aura of revelations about to emerge. It was impossible not to notice that this woman carried a history, a trajectory, a silent authority that completely escaped the narrow vision of that man accustomed to measuring value by what is seen on the outside. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's something fascinating about the strength that comes from emotional control. Not that rigid control that swallows one's own feelings, but the conscious control of someone who knows exactly who they are. The woman before him didn't need to prove anything. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to justify her presence. She didn't even need to defend herself. And that's precisely what created this feeling so suspended in the air, as if she were conducting the situation without moving a muscle. A silent leadership that doesn't depend on shouting, positions, or apparent titles. True authority manifests itself like this: firm, subtle, undeniable. And when we observe stories like this, we are inevitably led to reflect on our own experiences. How many times have we been underestimated? How many times has someone tried to reduce our identity to a function, an appearance, a hasty judgment? How many times has the world tried to tell us who we are, and how many times have we had to show, calmly and truthfully, that we are much more than they imagine? This woman represents that strength. She is not just reacting to the billionaire. She is revealing, through her own silence, that there is a whole world inside her that he cannot even imagine. Meanwhile, he continues talking, walking, gesturing, but now there's a subtle difference in his posture, as if something there, in her gaze, in the silence, in the almost invisible firmness, had stirred him in a way he himself doesn't understand. And even if he tries to disguise it, that first crack in his pride has already been made, and it is precisely in these cracks that the truth usually enters, gradually transforming everything that seemed so solid. And that's why this moment becomes so powerful. Because even before the big reveal, even before the story's twist, we already feel that something is out of place, something that doesn't fit with what he believes about her, and even less with what he believes about himself. This subtle tension, this growing contrast, this feeling that at any moment the narrative could turn, all of this begins to build an inevitable path for what is yet to come. And while this silent energy intensifies, the woman remains there, serene, aware, in control of herself. Nothing about her changes, and yet everything around her seems to begin to change because of her. The story continues to unfold with this discrete force, preparing the ground for the next step in this journey, where every detail gains meaning and every gesture carries a significance he cannot yet perceive. Comment below. This makes sense to me. The billionaire continued pacing down the corridor as if he owned the place, gesturing exaggeratedly, laughing loudly at his own jokes, and making it clear that he believed himself to be the most important character in that environment. It was almost strange to observe someone so convinced of a superiority, built solely on money and the power he believed he controlled. With each step, he seemed to want to reaffirm that he was above everyone there, as if everyone else were mere extras in a story where he was the absolute protagonist. And in this almost theatrical movement, his arrogance became even more evident, like a thick layer covering any trace of humanity. As he walked along, he continued to make offensive comments, talking about how some people were in the wrong place and how certain positions required truly prepared people. He looked at the black woman with an almost childlike disdain, as if she represented everything he considered inferior. He spoke loudly about business, investments, power and influence, always placing himself at the center of the narrative, as if he were the ultimate example of success and a winning mentality. But in reality, every word that came out of his mouth made the abyss between material wealth and true greatness clearer. The students around, previously just uncomfortable spectators, now exchanged glances of indignation and disbelief. Some tried to disguise it, others clearly showed their discomfort. There was an atmosphere of tension that ran through the corridor like a wire stretched too tight about to snap. Professors appeared at the classroom doors, drawn by the noise, and quickly understood what was happening. Those familiar with the college's routine immediately perceived the absurd irony of the situation. Even those who didn't know the woman well could still grasp that something was very wrong, because no true authority needs to humiliate someone to be legitimized. And in that stark contrast between his noise and her serenity, something was silently beginning to form: expectation. It was almost an energy circulating in the air, as if everyone, except him, already knew that the truth was inevitably approaching. There were no shouts, no direct confrontation, but there was a collective perception that this man was digging his own grave without realizing it. The revelation seemed to walk towards him like a shadow growing on the ground, about to reach him. He, in turn, remained trapped in his own narrative, unable to notice the expressions around him or the way the environment seemed to be gradually transforming. He spoke of leadership, important decisions, global influence, international travel, multi-million-dollar companies, as if he were offering the world a lesson in greatness. But the more he spoke, the clearer the distance became between his words and his actions. Because true leadership is not imposed by force, it is earned through character. Important decisions are not built on contempt. They are structured with respect, and real influence is not born of fear, it is born of trust. The curious thing is that he didn't realize any of it. He was so focused on reinforcing his image and feeding his ego that he couldn't catch the attentive gaze of those who knew the hidden truth behind that woman's calm demeanor. And this blindness, this inability to see beyond his own reflection, was perhaps his biggest mistake, because while he believed he was belittling someone, he was actually exposing his own frailties, his prejudices, his limitations. He was unintentionally revealing who he really was behind all the luxury. A small man, driven by insecurity so deep that they needed to be masked by ostentation. The woman, on the other hand, remained there without changing. She continued with that same calm, profound gaze, capable of piercing layers of arrogance without losing an inch of dignity. It was like observing two completely opposite mentalities, one that needs to diminish itself to feel great, and one that is already great in itself, effortlessly, and this difference became more evident with each passing second, as if the scene were being illuminated by an invisible spotlight, highlighting the backstage of a truth that would soon come to light. Some students watched the billionaire and then looked at her as if trying to understand why she hadn't said anything yet. There was almost a silent plea for her to reveal who she was. But she seemed to know that everything happens at the right time, that certain revelations need to be awaited, matured, allowed to evolve until they reach the necessary impact. After all, it's not just any truth that transforms, it's the truth spoken at the precise moment. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something powerful in the contrast between appearance and essence. It's easy to look at someone and believe you know everything about their journey. Easy to think that recognition comes from expensive clothes, an authoritative posture, a rehearsed speech, but real transformation doesn't come from what you see, but from who you are. And there, in that hallway, that difference was taking shape before everyone. His arrogance was noisy, full of artificial shine. Her strength was silent, ingrained, impossible to ignore. She didn't need to defend herself against the insults, because her very existence refuted each one of them. And that's a point many people forget. When you know your worth, nothing the other person says has any real power. Impact only exists when there is doubt, and she had none. She knew exactly who she was. She knew what she represented in that institution. She knew the weight of the decisions she made daily. Her authority didn't depend on external recognition. It was built over years of history, work, and merit. However, there was more happening there than just a clash of attitudes. There was also the anticipation of the revelation, The students' looks said it. The teacher's silence said it. The very atmosphere seemed to hold its breath. Everyone knew that the fate of that arrogance was inevitable, to collide with the truth that was approaching with firm and discreet steps. And as he continued speaking, increasingly convinced that he was in control of the situation, the feeling that a turning point was near grew within each person in that space. He didn't realize he was being observed not as a great leader, but as someone about to face a lesson that would change everything. One of those lessons that life teaches precisely, almost surgically, when it wants to make someone see their own reflection without a filter. When he finally stopped talking to adjust his suit and look around with an air of superiority, the hallway seemed different. The atmosphere, previously merely uncomfortable, now carried such a strong expectation that it was almost palpable. And yet, he continued without understanding. He didn't realize that each word had placed more weight on himself, creating the perfect setting for the moment when the truth, that truth that everyone saw except him, would finally reach the center of the scene. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. When the board announces that the ceremony is about to begin, an almost ritual silence falls over the auditorium. The billionaire adjusts his jacket as if preparing to be seen, to be applauded, to receive yet another of those applauses he always believed he deserved. But something changes in the air when the rector's name is called. It's as if time ties a small knot, as if a hidden truth is about to pierce through all layers of appearance and reveal what has always been there, hidden in the backstage of human arrogance. The side door opens, and suddenly that same woman he humiliated minutes before appears walking towards the stage. There is no hurry, no trembling, no anger. There is only a serenity that only someone who knows their own history can sustain. Each of her steps is a silent response to the decisions he made, to the hasty judgments, to the superior mentality he believed he possessed. His expression crumbles slowly, like an ancient wall cracking from within. First his eyes, which widen as he tries to understand if this is real. Then his lips tremble slightly as he realizes there is no escape. He, who built an entire empire on the strength of his personal narrative, finds himself a prisoner of a scene he cannot control. The audience senses the shock, and there is something almost symbolic in that suspended energy. It's not about humiliation, it's about revelations, about the invisible impact of small actions, about the inevitable transformation that happens when the truth finally emerges. She steps onto the stage, calmly adjusts the microphone, and the entire room seems to align around her. The billionaire swallows hard, forces a smile that doesn't hold, tries to create a bridge of apology with a wavering look. But his mask has already fallen. It fell when he pointed the door at someone he considered inferior. It fell when arrogance spoke louder than compassion. It fell when he realized he knew nothing beyond his own version of events, and now everyone is witnessing the silent dismantling of that arrogance. The dean doesn't look at him with superiority. She simply recognizes him as part of a journey she overcame long ago, and that, for him, hurts more than any harsh speech. It is there, before hundreds of people, that the billionaire realizes something he never admitted to himself. His greatness was always fragile. It depended on the gaze of others, on reverence, on the red carpet rolled out beneath his feet. And at that moment, seeing that the woman he scorned occupies the highest place in that institution, he sees himself as small, not because she diminishes him, but because she forces him to confront his own truth. The audience, even in silence, vibrates inwardly. There is a collective, almost cathartic relief in witnessing poetic justice being fulfilled. It is not revenge. It is coherence. It is the natural echo of choices. It is proof that life always finds a way to balance the game when we least expect it. The rector begins her speech with a firm yet gentle voice. She speaks of overcoming, of doors that close and windows that open, of paths that are never determined by appearances, but by the courage to continue when no one believes. And as she speaks, the billionaire tries to compose himself, tries to straighten his posture, tries to participate in the moment as if nothing had happened. But with each sentence she utters, he seems to shrink a little more, because each word is an involuntary reminder of what he has just done. The truth is, in that auditorium, no one needs to point the finger. Reality speaks for itself, and the authority she carries doesn't come from her position, but from the history he was unaware of, and which everyone now respects. There is something profoundly inspiring in this scene. The way life places us before unexpected mirrors, forcing us to see what we have avoided for years. And there, on that illuminated stage, the billionaire finds himself before the biggest mirror of his journey. Not a mirror made of glass, but a mirror made of conscience. He tries to whisper an apology when she glances at him, but she simply continues her speech, as if understanding that certain answers don't need to be said in public. After all, there are wounds that don't heal with hasty words, and there are lessons that only come when pride is uprooted. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this moment isn't just an emotional shock for the viewer, but a breaking point in the inner journey of each character present. Before continuing, comment below. Does this make sense to me? When the dean finishes the first part of her speech, something changes in the atmosphere of the room. It's not just her presence that commands respect. It's the way her dignity permeates the space, as if each person there is reminded that true authority doesn't come from numbers, but from conscience. The billionaire remains seated, motionless, his gaze fixed on her like someone who finally understands the impact of his own decisions. For the first time in his life, he seems small within his own expensive suit, as if all the brilliance that has accompanied him for years has been extinguished by a simple change of perspective. It's almost poetic to perceive how life works behind the scenes, how sometimes the deepest revelation appears precisely when someone tries to hide their own fragility behind power and status. He takes a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. But no composure is strong enough to withstand the weight of the hidden truth that has just fallen upon him, because at that moment he understands that no amount of wealth can buy character, no amount of influence can manufacture humility, and no fortune can compensate for an empty heart. The rector continues speaking, now addressing the responsibility each person has in the world, the value of small actions, the importance of education not only as a diploma, but as a way of life. And without mentioning names, without looking directly in his direction, she delivers a phrase that seems to pierce the air like a silent arrow. True power is that which transforms, not that which oppresses. The audience immediately perceives the weight of these words. It is not an attack. It is not a provocation. It is a lesson, one of those that stay with you, that force you to observe your own mentality and question which behaviors you are nurturing without realizing it. The billionaire closes his eyes for a moment, as if trying to digest everything at once. And for the first time, there is no arrogance there. There is discomfort. There is awareness. There is the beginning of a change, even if he doesn't admit it, even if he still tries to maintain what remains of his own image. Because, deep down, he understands, those who are truly powerful don't need to prove anything. True authority is silent, firm, and unwavering. She doesn't need to shout to be heard, nor humiliate to be respected. She simply exists, and her presence says it all. The ceremony continues, but now with a completely different atmosphere. The audience observes the rector with sincere admiration. People don't just see her position. They see her journey, her overcoming challenges, the strength built away from the spotlight. And this strength is so real that even the billionaire, accustomed to dominating every space he steps into, seems to shrink before her, not out of imposition, but out of recognition. There is something profoundly transformative in this contrast, because there, before everyone, it becomes evident that money can open doors, but only character keeps someone worthy of walking through them. That wealth can buy comfort, but never true respect. That fame can elevate a name, but only integrity sustains a story, and the rector knows this. That's why she doesn't respond arrogantly, doesn't return the humiliation, doesn't take advantage of the moment to expose what happened behind the scenes. She simply shows who she is, and that in itself puts everything in its place. At the end of her speech, she concludes with a phrase that makes the entire audience shift in their seats, as if they had just received advice they would never forget. Dignity is the only wealth that is never lost. The billionaire looks away, not out of shame for the phrase, but out of awareness that it reveals exactly what was lacking in his attitude. And this awareness is his greatest defeat, and at the same time, his first internal step towards something he doesn't yet understand. The ceremony continues, but no one there is truly bound by the schedule. Everyone is absorbing the scene they witnessed, the silent message that echoes behind every gesture. And the most curious thing is that despite all the tension of this moment, what remains is a feeling of victory, not the noisy victory of someone who wants to defeat someone, but the intimate victory of someone who witnesses an act of courage, maturity, and truth. Because her presence on that stage, in that position, at that moment, is living proof that life always rewards those who pursue their journey with determination. It is confirmation that no look of contempt defines anyone's destiny, and it's a reminder that, in the end, the true giants aren't those who speak the loudest, but those who stand firm when no one believes in them. The audience applauds, and the billionaire, even trying to hide behind a neutral expression, also stands, not out of protocol, but because he understands that there is something bigger than him there, bigger than his name, bigger than his empire. There is a mirror there that he can no longer avoid, and this mirror shows reality unfiltered. The most powerful is not the one who controls, but the one who inspires, not the one who imposes, but the one who elevates, not the one who has more, but the one who is more. The rector smiles, not in triumph, but in peace. And this smile, calm and confident, concludes the first stage of a revelation that goes far beyond that room. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because this moment still holds a layer that few perceive at first glance, something that changes everything when we observe carefully. Before continuing, write in the comments, "I'm on this journey too." And if you've made it this far, you can feel that this story touched something deep inside you, perhaps because deep down, everyone has gone through a moment that revealed who was really on their side, or who only seemed bigger until the truth came out. And it's precisely because it brings up conversations like this, profound, full of impact, and that shake up the way we see things, that I invite you, in a very relaxed way, to subscribe to the channel. It's not just to watch new videos, but to continue this journey of reflection and transformation that we are building together here. If this content resonated with you, please leave a like. This helps the video reach people who need to hear this same message, and, in a natural way, strengthens this space we are creating. And since you stayed until the end, leave a comment with a phrase that only those who truly followed everything will understand. I'm with you until the end. I'll know you were here, experiencing every detail of this story with me. And before you leave, there's a video here that perfectly complements this topic and delves even deeper into this conversation. Click and continue reading there.